Congratulations, you are old, you are officially old. If you're not old yet, you will be eventually, because today marks the 15th anniversary of Pokemon Platinum version in Japan. Given the time of recording this though, on the 13th of September 2023, it is probably the 14th in Japan already, so I kind of missed it by a little bit. But yeah, I honestly can't believe where the time has gone in these past 15 years. I've gone from being a carefree child to a working man who is stressed all the time and constantly worrying about the future. So I thought I'd sit down today and reminisce on a simpler time, because Pokemon Platinum is probably one of my favorite Pokemon games. At the start of this video I mentioned that the release date for this game in Japan was 15 years ago to this very day, so the 13th of September 2008. But in the UK, in England, that release date for this game was actually the 22nd of May 2009, because I don't know if the young'uns will know, but there was a time before X and Y that Pokemon games did not have simultaneous worldwide releases. Up until Black 2, they would come out several months in advance in Japan, then they would spend a few months probably like doing all the localization and then bring it out to the West. So this game came out on the 22nd of May, and I actually have that committed to memory. It's all in here, because when I was a kid, I have like a book holder in my room that's been there for God knows how many years. I scribbled down all sorts of information in a really disjointed and crazy looking way, which I'll show in the photos that are going to be presented on screen. I just scribbled shit down about this game, like Giratina Origin Form, Shaman Sky Form, like Regigigas for some reason, Rotom forms. Yeah, I just wrote a lot of shit down for some reason, because I was crazy hyped for this game. I remember from the very instant that we got like those really crappy like leaked images from like Kodo magazine, to actually getting like high-res versions, then seeing Giratina Origin Form, Shaman Sky Form. Like I remember the very first footage we saw, or that I saw, was off Giratina rising from the ground at Spear Pillar, in his kind of ominous looking shadowy form. Because he's obviously outside of his home reality or whatever, and he's got those really like eerie looking red glowing eyes, and then he jumps at the screen. That to me, like to my 10-year-old self, that was absolutely amazing, and that's a memory that will stick with me forever, seeing stuff like that, because this was a time when I mean if you go back to 2009, the sort of cutscenes we would have in Pokemon games, like look at Gen 3 and it's just Kyogre and Groudon pixels bouncing around, and then Rayquaza comes down from the sky. It's all like very simple animations, but this was the first time that like I saw a cutscene in a Pokemon game that looked like really cinematic. And I know in Pearl, you know, that you get the whole scene where you see the distortions above all of Sinnoh when Palkia or Dialga, if you've got Diamond, appear at Spear Pillar. But something about seeing Giratina, like the jump scare in Platinum, in that early footage really blew me away at the time. And it's completely tangential, but like this morning when I heard the news that Platinum turned 15 years old, in my head I was just hearing like the bike theme from Gen 4, and I'll play it during this video. Like that music though, it just gives me such a sense of like wonder and, you know, freedom, and that's the kind of feeling that it would evoke in me as a kid back then as well, because I mean, this was a time when we weren't really allowed to go to, like, beyond our own street, right? So, like, I could probably cycle to the nearby street, like, the street next door? No, the other street. I could probably cycle to the other street, but, like, I wasn't... My world was very small when I was a kid, and if I'd go anywhere, it would generally be with my parents, or it'd be the little area in my neighborhood that I was actually allowed to venture within. So for me, like, Pokemon was something that, like, you know, you start off, you're a 10-year-old kid, and you literally go around an entire region, and it's themes like surfing themes and the bike theme, like the one I mentioned for Gen 4, that really, like, evoke that sense of, like, adventure, which is something that Pokemon's never really missed at. I feel like even the newer games, say what you will about them, but the music's always on point. So yeah, I don't know, I just suddenly started thinking about the bike theme from Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, because there's a lot of nostalgia there. And this is also a funny little thing, but I got the chance to go to Japan for the first time earlier this year, which is something that kid me would have found completely surreal, because I actually did visit like the Pokemon Center and stuff, which was a bit, you know, a bit too consumerist for my taste, I guess. It's just full of stuff you can buy, pretty much. But the thing I did do while I was in Japan, which was total wish fulfillment, is I went in one of the combines, right, and I got myself like a big chunky copy of Koro Koro magazine. I got this copy of Koro Koro magazine, which is a hefty thing. This copy actually does have some news about Pokemon in it. So if I go to the very start of it, yeah, it's got stuff on like the DLC, and then it has a little bit about like the TCG as well. Yeah, I'm gonna get sidetracked by reading a Koro Koro magazine. But yeah, the reason I got this is because Koro Koro for me always had a thing when I was a kid. Whenever I'd see new news about Pokemon, it would generally be leaks from this magazine that would be posted online. You know, generally they get posted on like 4chan first. So Mega Mewtwo X and Y from X and Y, they leaked on 4chan, which is how I saw them. There's like pictures of them that were posted, that were put in Koro Koro magazine back in 2013 or whatever. That's how we were exposed to them, through this magazine pretty much. I guess the inner child of me, maybe this appeases him in some way. But this is something I kind of had to do, because like Koro Koro has a lot of... I associate Koro Koro with like pre-release Pokemon news. Not so much anymore, because I haven't really followed Pokemon pre-releases in a very long time, since like X and Y pretty much is the last time I really cared. But Gen 4 and Gen 5, like the pre-release for stuff, like I'll never forget that, being a kid and seeing like new information being like trickled down through this magazine. So I guess a funny memory I have about this game is the day I got it actually. So what I did is obviously like I was good at school, you know, I was a good boy, did my homework, did well, stuff like that. And then I think it was the Friday that week that it came out. Like, I'm struggling to remember which day of the week the 22nd was, but I'm pretty sure it was that Friday. I took my parents, we went to a shopping center, like a complex, a shopping mall, for the American viewers, pretty close to where we live. It's called the Metro Center. And back then, you know, before COVID and like the economy declining and all that shit, it was actually pretty, for kid me, it was like a wonderland pretty much. So I took them to the Metro Center, and we went to HMV, we went to Game Station, which was a thing back then, Granger Games, which was a local game chain, which was still around back then, and Game. And I basically, like, I took my parents and, like, we price compared with, like, every single shop, like, where it was cheapest. And to this day, I have no idea how my dad did this, but somehow he managed to heckle with Game to bring their price down to what HMV was selling Pokemon Platinum for. Like, I remember he told them at Game that HMV was selling Pokemon Platinum with the Steelbook for like 30 something pounds, and he managed to convince them at Game to bring it down, which I don't know how the hell he did that. Like, I do not have the balls myself to do something like that, but I will always remember my dad heckling a major retailer, like a major game chain, a video game store chain, whatever, to bring the price down for us, which is absolutely unheard of, I think. I've never heard of anyone else doing that kind of shit. So yeah, that's how I got the game, and obviously I came back. One of the things that was really hyped up about Platinum was the fact that like everything was snowy for some reason, but then when you actually start the game, it's like a little bit of snow in Twinleaf Town, and your character's wearing slightly like heavier clothing, and like a scarf or something, but I'm pretty sure he wears a scarf normally as well. But essentially, yeah, there's a teeny little bit of snow in the region, and your character's wearing heavier clothes, and that is like the extent of like the increased snowiness. Like, I remember they gave an actual reason for why it was snowy as well, because of like space-time distortions or something. But yeah, that's really funny looking back on. And speaking of Game, like, I actually did try and go and get like a Shaman event for Platinum. So like, I remember venturing out after school, going to a game store with my DS in hand and everything, and asking if they could transfer the Shaman to my game, and they couldn't do it because they didn't have it running in this particular store. So that's something that I will always forever hold regrets about, that I wasn't able to like get a Pokemon event in store, because nowadays you can just get them all over Wi-Fi and there's nothing really special about it. But I think up until Gen 4, and in fact even Gen 5 really, there used to be like in-store legendary Pokemon distributions, which is not a thing anymore. We do not need these things, sadly. With the newfangled era of technology that we live in, things can simply be sent to us over the power of the internet. The power of science truly is amazing. It's all come full circle. I've become the NPC from the start of town in this video now. The powers of the science is incredible, or science is amazing. That's what that guy always says in each new Pokemon game. And like, unrelated to the games, but obviously like I did used to get the trading card games a little bit as a kid too, you know. I was consuming all facets of the Pokemon franchise. And two cards I pulled back then that I still have with me today, and it wasn't until relatively recently that I realized these cards are actually kind of worth something, are these. Very cool looking reverse holos. They don't really make reverse holos quite as cool as this anymore. But you may think to yourself, it's just a Duskull and a Driftwoon. Well, they're shiny. These guys are slightly in dinked up condition, but these are the ones I pulled myself from Platinum packs. Because in Platinum they started doing like secret rare shiny Pokemon cards. So I pulled them. I remember the freaking the Driftwoon. I remember pulling this in I think it was a fall or an autumn 2010 Suicune tin from the Heart Gold and Soul Silver era, which had like a promo, like a really cool promo shiny Suicune card that I still have. But yeah, those are my two coolest Pokemon Platinum era cards. That I pulled myself, that I have some fondness for, some nostalgic fondness for. So yeah, like I mentioned, Pokemon Platinum, and I've got my villa up there, you can't really see it. I'll put some footage of the game up in this video as I'm talking, as I'm rambling on. But Pokemon Platinum really represented a time for me when each new Pokemon game was expanding on the previous in some way. So Pokemon Platinum obviously came with a lot of upgrades over Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. The first thing that comes to mind is the like improved Pokemon diversity. So Diamond and Pearl are pretty famous for having very few, like a very limited regional Pokedex, which wasn't really a problem for Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, but somehow it became a problem for Gen 4, which is kind of weird. But Platinum really improved upon it, and there were more like fire types for one thing. So a famous thing that people bring up is that the fire type Elite Four member barely uses fire types in Diamond and Pearl, but to be fair, he uses every fire type that is available in the game pretty much up to that point. So I really appreciate the improved Pokemon diversity, and you know, one of the things I did do, which I'm not sure if it was available in Diamond and Pearl, but I did catch a Feebas at Mount Coronet, which took a very long time, and I used my Milotic in my team. And speaking of which, I also did the same in Gen 3 recently too. I caught a Feebas near the Weather Institute recently in Sapphire, and that took way longer, and I find that more impressive because I was working a full-time job and, you know, limited time to play and all that. But it's way harder in Gen 3. But not to discredit it in Gen 4, it's pretty hard to get a Feebas, and forever I will be proud of the fact that I managed to catch a Feebas in Pokemon Platinum. And speaking of Pokemon Platinum, I guess the Battle Frontier being added to Pokemon Platinum was a pretty huge deal. Like, it's a pretty expansive part of the map, and previously in Diamond and Pearl it was just a battle tower. In Platinum, it is a full-on area with like 5 Frontier Brains and badges, I forget what the things are called. It was a full-fledged Battle Frontier that realistically you could put a lot of time into trying to beat, because it is very difficult. And it is a thing that we no longer get in Pokemon games. The last time we got anything like a Pokemon Battle Frontier was in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which was pretty much the same one from Platinum slapped somewhere in Johto in Olivine City, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, that's something that is sorely missed for me personally, because even if I wouldn't have like gotten, I never beat all the Frontier Brains, but certainly I enjoyed like trying out the different play modes, like the different kind of styles in each of the institutes in the Battle Frontier. So yeah, I kind of missed that. And at least like up until Sun and Moon, they still had like some kind of battle facility, but then I played Scarlet and Violet and beat that, and that doesn't really have anything of the sort, which kind of sucks, honestly. Another big thing about Pokemon Platinum that I guess is kind of overlooked nowadays, with the fact that we casually get like new Pokemon within generations. We actually got new forms within a generation. So we got Giratina Origin form, and we got Shaman Sky form, which is pretty mad. Like, at the time, I remember losing my marbles over that. The fact that they, like, I couldn't figure out how they would, like, make this work with, like, Diamond and Pearl, because essentially it's like introducing new Pokemon, right? Like, I had no idea how they'd do that. And obviously they put some stuff in place in the game, so you can't really trade over. Like, you know, like, obviously the form's not going to be the same in Diamond and Pearl if you trade that Pokemon over. Like, you weren't allowed to trade them and stuff like that if they were holding, like, the Grisiusaur. But, honestly, that was something that, like, thinking back on it now was pretty revolutionary for Pokemon. And the final thing, I guess, that really sticks out in my mind is the Distortion world. Now, I guess it's not quite the same as having Kanto within Gold and Silver and Crystal, But for me, it was the fact that they added this whole new, like, other dimension in the game, literally, that you can explore. Yeah, there's not much to explore, it's literally just like a hallway with a couple puzzles and stuff, but the visuals of like going upside down and surfing upwards and doing loops and stuff, for me as a kid that was kind of crazy. It was, and it made fighting Giratina and actually catching him that much more satisfying, because not only do you have to traverse Mount Coronet, which is already pretty labyrinthine, right? Not only do you have to like go all the way through Mount Coronet, but then you also have to like go through this whole new world and solve these puzzles, which, you know, like I was a kid, my brain wasn't fully developed. Some of that stuff was actually kind of difficult for me to figure out at the time. But yeah, I just felt a lot more rewarding actually getting to Giratina at the end. And yeah, you can go back anytime really to the Distortion world, and there's not really any point in doing so because there's no Pokemon and stuff. But to me it's just kind of a reminder of a different time when we'd get these third versions which would kind of try and add as much to the game as possible, whether it was stuff like the UI being overhauled to look a bit cooler, or like adding new areas in the map, changing the Pokedex a little bit, changing the music a little bit. You could argue that it's kind of scummy that Game Freak had this kind of practice of doing 2 versions, which was already, I guess, inherently kind of scammy, and then doing a 3rd version. But you know, kid me didn't complain, and even now, like, I honestly don't mind. You could argue that they could just let us have multiple save files on these games, and then I wouldn't have to worry about having 2 cartridges from Gen 4 so that I can start one and keep one save and vice versa. But I don't know, man, like, I'm not gonna argue that stuff. For me, Pokemon Platinum felt like an absolute overhaul over Diamond and Pearl. It is objectively, I would say, a complete improvement. I wouldn't say to people to not play Diamond and Pearl. If you want to play them and then play Platinum, that's up to you, that's fine. But certainly once you experience the Pokedex, you'll go back and play Diamond and Pearl, and you'll think, man, this is very restricted. So I guess to finish off this video, I'm just going through my like save file on Pokemon Platinum at the moment. And what I've realized, I haven't actually started a new save on this game in a very long time. This is over 10 years old now at this point. So it's got my Milotics, I'm looking at my PC, and a lot of the Pokemon I've named after like DC characters, like DC supervillains like Doc Polaris, Mr. Mime, stuff like that, which I get a bit of a kick out of. But yeah, just looking at the Pokemon that I caught, you can see the diversity and like the kind of stuff you can catch here. One small thing that I really like about Platinum is the villa in the resort area and being able to fill that out. Yeah, it's kind of, it's just padding out the game pretty much, making you grind money constantly to like save up and buy these items of furniture that realistically don't really even serve any purpose. But kid me kind of love that shit, and it's kind of like an Animal Crossing light if you think about it in a Pokemon game. It's like having a secret base, which this game already had anyway because of the underground, but it's like a cool house, and the fact that this kid can afford like a full villa in a pretty expensive part of Sinnoh. Like, you know, if you go to the Ribbon Syndicate, also in the resort area, like these ribbons they sell are expensive. Like 999,999 Poke Yen or whatever the currency is. That's crazy. Unless this shit's like really inflated, it kind of seems like the cost of living in the Pokemon world is super low for a 10-year-old to be able to just go out and get their own house. Like, there's got to be some mad inflation going on with that currency. But yeah, I guess that was just a little bit of rambling about Pokemon Platinum, which I still can't process the fact that it's 15 years old. And I guess next year I'll be talking about Pokemon Soul Silver being 15 years old. This is also my original copy from when I was a kid. Then after that I'll be talking about Pokemon Black being 15 years old. And then I'll be talking about this guy, Pokemon Black 2, the final of the regular DS games, being 15 years old as well in 2027, which is completely insane to think of. I mean, the fact that Pokemon X and Y Gen 6 is 10 years old, my brain is having difficulty like functioning, like processing this stuff. So I guess the whole point of this video is just a somewhat young guy kind of feeling the crushing weight of life going on and aging, I guess. So if you enjoyed this, feel free to leave a like and, you know, leave some comments about your memories of Pokemon Platinum. If you remember the pre-release, getting the game, some of your key memories, but I'll never forget the whole process of waiting for the game to come out and then actually getting it that first day and playing it. So yeah, thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed this blast of nostalgia, and I'm gonna shut up now, I guess.